And Gyu did as the Shah commanded, and took neither food nor rest till he set foot within the gates of Rustam. And Rustam greeted him kindly, and asked him of his mission. And when he had read the Shah's letter, he questioned Gyu concerning Sohrab. He said, I should not marvel if such a hero arose in Iran, but that a warrior of renown should come forth from amid the Turks, I cannot believe it. But you say no one knows where he is from. I have a son in Samangan, but he is still very young, and his mother writes to me that he enjoys in the sports of his age. And though he has become a hero among men, it is yet not his time to lead forth an army. And that which you say has been done, surely it is not the work of a youngster. But enter into my house, and we will confer together concerning this adventure. Then Rustam bade his cooks to make ready another banquet, and he feasted Gyu, and troubled his head with wine, and caused him to forget cares and time. But when the morning came, Gyu remembered the commands of the Shah, that he not delay, but return with speed, and conveyed this to Rustam. But Rustam said, Don't worry, for death will surely fall upon these men of Turan. Stay with me yet another day, and rest. Water your lips that are parched, for though this Sohrab is like a hero unto Sam, Zal, and Nariman, he will fall by my hands. And he made ready yet another banquet, and 3 days they celebrated without ceasing. But on the 4th Gyu arose with resolve, and came before Rustam ready for departure. He said, I must return, O Pehliva, for I know how Kavus is ill-tempered, and the fear of Sohrab weighs on his heart, and his soul burns with impatience, and he has lost sleep, and suffers hunger and thirst on this account. He will be very angry if we delay any longer. Then Rustam said, Fear not, for none on earth dare be angered with me. But he did as Gyu desired, and made ready his army, and saddled Rakhsh, and set forth from Zabulistan. And when they arrived to the courts of the Shah, the nobles came forth to meet them, and do homage before Rustam. And when they had come in, Rustam unsaddled Rakhsh and hastened into the presence of his lord. But Kavus saw him, and was angry, and spoke not, and his brows were knit with fury. And when Rustam bowed before him, he unlocked the doors of his mouth, and words of folly escaped his lips. He said, Who is Rustam, that he defies my power and disregards my commands? If I had a sword in my grasp, I would split his head. Seize him, I command, and hang him upon the nearest gallows, and let his name never be spoken in my presence. When he heard these words, Gyu trembled in his heart. But he said, Do you raise your hand against Rustam? And the Shah was beside himself, and he cried with a loud voice that Gyu be hanged together with the other. And he bade Tousi lead them forth, and Tousi would have led them out, for he hoped that the anger of the Shah would be appeased. But Rustam broke from his grasp, and stood before Kavus, and all the nobles were filled with fear when they saw his anger. And he flung reproaches at Kavus, and he recalled to him his follies, and the march to Mazandaran and Hamavaran, and his flight to heaven, and he reminded him how that but for Rustam he would not now be seated upon the throne of light, and he bade him threaten Sohrab the Turk with these gallows. And he said, I am a free man and no slave. I am a servant to God alone, and without Rustam Kavus is nothing, and the world is subject to me, and Rakhsh is my throne, and my sword is my seal, and my helmet my crown. And but for me, who called forth Kavus, your eyes had never looked upon this throne. And had I desired, I could have sat upon this seat. But now I am weary of your follies, and I will turn away from Iran. And when this Turk puts you under his yoke, I will not learn of it. Then he turned and strode out of the presence chamber, and he sprang upon Rakhsh who waited outside, and he vanished from before their eyes before the nobles had rallied from their astonishment. They were downcast and oppressed with boding cares, and they held counsel among themselves what to do. for Rustam was their mainstay, and they knew that, bereft of his arm and counsel, they could not stand against this Turk, and they blamed Kavus and counted over the good deeds that Rustam had done for him. And they pondered and spoke long, and in the end they resolved to send a messenger to Kavus, and they chose Godard's the Age to stand before the Shah. And Godard's did as they desired, and he spoke long and without fear. He counted over each deed that had been done by Rustam, and he reproached the Shah with his ingratitude. And he said how Rustam was the shepherd, and how the flock could not be led without its leader. And Kavus heard him out, and knew his words were of reason and truth, and he was ashamed of what he had done, and confounded when he beheld his acts so nakedly before him. And he humbled himself before Godard's and said, "What you say is right." And he entreated Godard's to go forward and seek Rustam, and bid him forget the evil words of his Shah and bring him back to the aid of Iran. And Godard's hastened forth to do as Kavus desired, and he told the nobles of his mission, and they joined him. And all the chiefs of Iran went forth in search of Rustam. And when they found him, they prostrated themselves unto the dust before him. And Godard's told him of his mission, and he prayed him to remember that Kavus was a man devoid of understanding, whose thoughts flowed over like newly fermented wine. And he said, though Rustam is angered against the king, the land of Iran had done no wrong that it should perish at his hands. If Rustam doesn't save her, surely it would fall under this Turk. But Rustam said, my patience has an end, and I fear none but God. What is this Kavus that he should anger me? And what am I that I have need of him? I have not deserved his evil words, but now I think of them no longer, but cast aside all thoughts of Iran. When the nobles heard these words, they grew pale, and fear took hold on their hearts. But Godard's full of wisdom opened his mouth and said, O Pehliva, when the people of Iran learn of this, they'll think that Rustam has fled before the face of this Turk. And when men believe that Tehmina is afraid, they will cease to combat, and Iran will be downtrodden at his hands. Turn not at this hour from your allegiance to the Shah, and tarnish not your glory by this retreat. Neither suffer that the downfall of Iran rests upon your head. Forget the words that Kavus spoke in empty anger, and lead us to battle against this Turk, for it must not be spoken that Rustam feared to fight a young boy. Rustam listened and pondered these words in his heart, and knew that they were good. But he said, Fear has never been known of me, neither has Rustam shunned the din of arms, and I depart not because of Sohrab, but because that scorn and insult have been my recompense. Yet when he had pondered a while longer, he saw that he must return to the Shah. So he did what he knew to be right, and rode till he came to the gates of Kavus, and he strode with a proud step into his presence. When the Shah saw Rustam from afar, he stepped down from off his throne, and came before his Pehliva, and craved his pardon for what happened. He said he had been angered because Rustam had delayed his arrival, and how haste was his birthright, and how he had forgotten himself in his vexation. But now was his mouth filled with the dust of repentance. And Rustam said, The world is the Shah's, and it behooves you to do what you deem best with your servants. And until old age my loins be girt in fealty to you, and may power and majesty be yours forever. And Kavus answered and said, O my Pehliva, may your days be blessed until the end. Then he invited him to feast with him, and they drank wine far into the night, and held counsel together. And servants poured rich gifts before Rustam, and the nobles rejoiced, and all was well again within the gates of the king. Then when the sun had risen and clothed the world with love, the clarions of war were sounded throughout the city, and men made ready to go forth in enmity before the Turks. And the legions of Persia came forth at the behest of their Shah, and their countless thousands hid the earth under their feet, and the air was darkened by their spears. And when they arrived at the plains where stood the fortress of Hujir, they set up their tents as was their manner. When the watchman saw them from the battlements, he set up a great cry, and Sohrab heard the cry, and when he learned that the enemy had come, he rejoiced, and demanded a cup of wine, and drank to their destruction. Then he called forth Human, and showed him the army, and bade him to be of good cheer, for he said that he saw within its ranks no hero of mighty mace who could stand against himself. So he bade his warriors to a banquet of wine, and he said that they should feast until time has come to meet their foes in battle. When the night had thrown her mantle over the earth, Rustam came before the Shah and asked to go beyond the camp, that he might see what manner of man was this stripling. And Kavus granted his request. Then Rustam went forth disguised in the garb of a Turk, and secretly entered the castle, and entered within the chamber where Sohrab held his feast. When he had looked upon the boy, he saw that he was like a tall cypress of good sap, and that his arms were sinewy and strong like the flanks of a horse, and that his stature was that of a hero, and round about him stood brave warriors. Slaves with golden casks poured wine before them, and they were all glad, neither did they dream of sorrow. While Rustam regarded them, Zinda changed his seat and came near the spot where Rustam was watching. Now Zinda was the brother to Tehmina and uncle to Sohrab, and she had sent him forth with her son that he might point out to him his father, whom he alone knew of all the army. And she did this that harm might not befall the heroes if they should meet in battle. Now Zinda, when he had changed his seat, thought that he had saw a watcher, and he strode towards the place where Rustam was hid, and he came before him and said, "Who are you? Come forth into the light that I may behold your face." But ere he could speak further, Rustam had lifted up his hand and struck him, and laid him dead upon the ground. Now Sohrab, when he saw that Zinda had gone out, was disquieted, and asked of his servants why the hero returned not to the banquet. So they went forth to seek him, and when they found him in his blood, they came and told Sohrab what they had seen, but Sohrab could not believe it. So he ran to the spot and bade them bring torches, and all the warriors and singing girls followed after him. When Sohrab saw it was true, he was sore grieved, but he didn't allow the banquet to end, for he didn't want the spirits of his men to be dampened with pity. So they went back yet again to the feast. Meanwhile Rustam returned to the camp, and as he entered the lines he encountered Gu, who went around to see that all was safe. And Gu, when he saw a tall man clad in the garb of a Turk, drew his sword and held himself ready for combat. But Rustam smiled and opened his mouth, and Gu knew his voice, and questioned him what he was doing in the darkness. Rustam told him, and he went before Kavus and related what he had seen, how no man like Sohrab has yet come forth from amid the Turks, and he likened him to Sam the son of Neriman. When the morning had come, Sohrab put on his armor, and he went to the height where he could look down over the camp of the Iranians. And he took Hujr with him, saying, "Seek not to deceive me, nor swerve from the paths of truth. If you reply to my questions with sincerity, I will loosen your bonds and give you treasures. But if you deceive me, you will languish till death in your chain." And Hujr said, "I will give answer to you according to my knowledge." Then Sohrab said, "I am about to question you concerning the nobles whose camps are spread beneath our feet, and you will name those who I point out. Behold, the tent of gold brocade, adorned with skins of leopard, before whose doors stand an elephant of war. Within its gates is a throne of turquoise, and over it floats a standard of violet, with a moon and sun worked into its center. Tell me now, whose pavilion is this that stands in the middle of the camp?" And Hujr replied, "It belongs to the Shah of Iran." Then Sohrab said, "To whom belongs the tent draped with green cloth? Before its doors is planted the flag of Kawa. I see upon its throne a Pehliwa, nobler of manner than all his fellows, whose head strikes the stars, and besides him stands a steed tall as he, and his standard shows a lion and a writhing dragon." When Hujr heard this question, he thought to himself, If I tell him the signs whereby he may know Rustam the Pehliva, surely he will fall upon him and seek to destroy him. It's probably best to keep silent." So he said to Sohrab, "This is some ally who has come to Kavus from far Cathay. His name is not known to me." When Sohrab heard this, he was downcast, and his heart was sad that he could not find Rustam. And though he saw the marks whereby his mother said that he would know Rustam, he could not credit the words of his eyes against the words of Hujr. So he asked again the name of the warrior, and yet again Hujr denied it to him, for it was written that it should come to pass that which was decreed. Then Sohrab, when he could not learn the tent of his father, questioned Hujr concerning Rustam, and asked yet a third time of the green tent. Yet Hujr ever replied that he did not know the name of its master, and Sohrab pressed him concerning Rustam. He said Rustam was in Zabulistan, for it was the feast of the roses. But Sohrab refused to believe that Kavus should go forth to battle without the aid of Rustam, whose might none could match. So he said to Hujr, "If you don't show me the tent of Rustam, I will strike your head from off your shoulders, and the world would fade before your eyes. Choose the truth or your life." And Hujr thought, though 500 men cannot withstand Rustam when roused to battle fury, something tells me that he may have found his equal in this boy. And because he is younger, he may actually subdue the Pehliva. What's my life worth against the welfare of Iran? I will abandon myself unto his hands, rather than show him the marks of Rustam the Pehliva. And he said, "Why do you seek to know Rustam the Pehliva? Surely you will know him in battle, and he will strike you dumb and quell your pride of youth. Yet I will not show him to you." When Sohrab heard these words, he raised his sword and smote Hujr, and made an end of him with a great blow. And he made himself ready for a fight, and leaped upon his steed of battle, and rode hard into the camp of the Iranians.